Let's have a look at App03 then. So App03 actually extends the functionality of App1. You'll notice here that we're given the course class and the student class. Remember back to App1 where we had to create an object of the course class and then enroll the student on that course. So we could then call the print method of the course to print out the details of what course the student's enrolled on. So you see we're actually given that functionality here as a starting place. So if you wanted to look at the source code, you should see similar methods to what you would have coded for App1. So I'm not going to major too much upon that in this video. If you do need to remind yourselves, then please go back to the video on App1 and that goes through that functionality in more detail. But assuming that we're comfortable with this functionality, that's good because then we can quite easily fulfill the first three requirements. We simply just have to create an object of the student and an object of the course and then enroll the student on the course. So assuming we're comfortable with that, I'm not going to go back over that here in this video. Instead, we're going to pick up from requirement 4, which is all about creating a module class. Okay, because if we go back up to the description here, we have to create an application that can calculate the final mark and grade for a student who has completed 4 modules as part of their course. That's the first sentence here. Okay, so we've got the course, we've got the student. We now need to create the 4 modules. And hopefully, if you're familiar with the patterns that we've been using so far, hopefully, as you see, we're required to create 4 similar entities, a group of 4 items. So therefore, this gives us a clue that we can create a structure for one of those modules and then reuse that for the other items, the other modules. Okay, so if we go back down to the 4th requirement, we've actually got another clue here. You'll see the capital M. Hopefully capitals signals to you that we're going to be dealing with a class here. So we want to create a module class so that we can then create 4 module objects. Okay, that's the idea here. So we're instructed to create a module class with a title, module code, and percentage mark. That's the 3 characteristics of the class. So hopefully we're getting familiar with this format, and we're seeing that these characteristics can be built as fields for the class. They act as the variables that each object can assign individual values to those fields. All right, so let's start there. Let's create a module class. Right, so let's modify the template code given to us. I'm going to fill in my name here. And the current date that I'm making this. And for completeness, let's just fill in a quick description here. Remember the hint I gave you. If you ever get stuck writing descriptions, take a look at other descriptions for classes, and that'll give you a little bit of a clue. Really, it's just giving an overview of what the class is going to do. So in this case, this class represents each of the modules that the student will take. Better put that on a new line here. Part of the course. It holds the title, module code, and percentage mark. Okay, so just a quick example. Of course, if you think of a more detailed one, please do modify that. I might have to update it as we go, but just something to give our user an idea of what we're doing. All right, so let's fill in this. Let's start with the fields. So we know that we're going to be working with a title, similar to the course. So each module has a title. That could be built as a string, okay, because it's predominantly going to store letters. So let's store it as a string. Let's also create a string for a module code. Here at this university, the codes will involve a series of numbers and letters. So a string would capture the letters. For example, it couldn't be an integer because we can't store letters in an integer. So let's work with a string. I'm going to call this code here simply because we've already got module as the class name, so I don't need to say module.module code. I can actually just say something like module.code. All right, so, and again, for the methods later, it makes sense to abbreviate that. All right, and let's finish up here with the final one, which is %mark. And again, I could just abbreviate that to mark. All right, and well, unless I wanted to store the percentage symbol, but I can easily concatenate that for the output later. That's not going to be a problem. And as I'm probably going to have to add these together, as I've read ahead and I know what's coming, I know I'm going to have to add these together later to get an average of the marks. So it makes sense that I use this and create this as an integer, so I can perform calculations on it, namely adding those marks together and then dividing them by the total number of modules, which will be 4 when I've created them all. Okay, so yeah, let's build that as an integer. Right, so there we go. There's our fields to start with. We might also want to just modify the rest of this template code given to us. So similar to what we had to do with the course, because we've deleted x, which was the sample variable given to us at the start. Just going to have to modify the rest of this. So that sample method, let's just make it void now so it will compile. I may also want to remove those tags as well because they're no longer representing what's going to happen in that sample method. Let's fill in the constructor, and I think what might be a good idea in our typical pattern, what we usually do is to pass in those values for the module at object creation. So let's do that here. Let's pass in certainly the title and the code, and then just assign them here. Remember, we use this keyword to refer to the field. So this dot title is going to refer to the field title, and then we want to assign it the value of title, the parameter that we pass in when we create this object. So again, similar pattern to what we've done before. And perhaps there might be a case where we want to pass in the mark at object creation if we know it. We're not technically been given the scenario of who's actually going to be using this application. I guess we can assume it's going to be an administrator of some kind, but possibly we might not know the mark at the creation of the module. Possibly that's going to be added later once the student completes the assignment. So working on that assumption, I'm going to create the module with the title and the code. I guess I could initialize the value of mark here just to give it a value to then overwrite later. Not essential, but just in case I accidentally try and add it, having a 0 value there would, of course, allow that addition to take place later if I forget to add the mark, rather than causing a potential exception if it's left as null or something. So I might just assign it to be 0. Always a good idea to do that with integers. So let's initialize it to 0 here, and then we'll want to update it later. And that's actually builds into the next requirement here, the 5th one, which is saying that a percentage mark can then be awarded to the module. So let's repurpose this sample method to do that. And this is going to essentially be a setter method. We're going to assign a value for one of our fields, which is mark in this case. So I could call this setMark if I want to, but in line with the terminology given here, I'm going to call it awardMark. All right, so I'm going to pass in the mark to this method. And then we're going to say, like our constructor, we're going to say, well, this mark equals the parameter mark. And as we're getting used to writing if statements, we might want to introduce some validation here. So as marks are going to be between 0 and 100, I might want to say, well, I only want to assign the potential mark that's being passed in, providing that it's greater than 0. It can't be a minus number, essentially, and it's less than 100. Or actually, technically, I should say less than or equal to in these cases, because I might actually score 0 or 100. All right, so technically, yes, these should be greater than or equal to. Remember to put the equal sign on the right-hand side of the greater than and less than operator. Okay, and I passed over it briefly, but hopefully we're comfortable. If we read chapter 3, logic operators should have been introduced in that chapter. And the way that the AND operator works is that it requires both of these. These are comparisons in this case to be true. It requires both of them to be true in order for this if statement to run. So providing that it is greater or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 100, it's between that range, essentially, that's when I want to assign it. Okay, so I might also want to have a little else statement as well, just to say if it's outside of that range, if it's a minus number or greater than 100, I might just have a bit of validation here to say that, please enter a mark between 0 and 100. All right, hopefully that's a little prompt to our user there. All right, so let's modify this. We can say that this method awards the mark for the module. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's just keep in line with the comments here as we go. Let's try and fill them in. So that should, once we create an object of module, we should then be able to assign or award a mark, set a mark for each of the modules. And let's just check we're still compiling here. So let's test this out. Let's create a module. Let's say we're representing CO452. And we're going to say that's programming concepts. And so there, either the module code as the there. And let's call the award mark. And just to test out my if statement, let's say we pass 101. It's going to say, please enter a mark between 0 and 100. That's good. It's telling me to run this again. And let's just check that it's still 0. Yeah, so it didn't assign 101. It's not allowing me to assign an erroneous mark. So let's run this again and type in a correct mark. So I get 67 and check that we're doing okay here. Yeah, we got 67 assigned. So that obviously worked. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's move on to the next requirements. So here we go. We've got the course here. The course has to have 4 modules. And also the next one reading ahead is module details can be printed. And actually, just before we move on from the module class, let's code the print method here. That'd be useful just so we can work out see the details rather than having to inspect the object. So let's create that whilst we're in the module class. And just like all the other print methods we've done in the past, it's just going to print out the values for the variables. Okay, so I'm just going to say the module code is the code. Let's copy that and say the module title is that. Of course, concatenating, that's the plus sign. Hopefully you're comfortable with that now. And then finally, the module mark is mark. And just thinking ahead, I might also want to put this on a new line. So I'm going to include the \n there. I think we've covered this previously, but just in case we haven't, this is an escape character. It just puts this on a new line. That's all that's going to do. It can be put within in the speech marks next to the string data. Okay, so that's that. Oh, let's just add a comment here just to keep in line with documentation. And let's say this method prints out the module details. There we go. That's the 7th one. Possibly we might have to change that a bit later, just in case we add any extra information that needs printing out, like the module completion. We're going to get to that. So that's the print methods. That's going to be useful later. Let's go back and work on the 6th requirement, which is the course must contain 4 modules. Okay, so think back to what you did in App 1, where you created an object of the course class in the student, so that you can then pass an object of a course to a student and then assign that object details to a local object within the student. And let's just show this visually. Here we go. Here's the local object, which is a field of the student. So the separate object that's created of the course, those details can then be copied into this object, which we did via the enroll on a course method here. You'll see that. And hopefully this is familiar. You've done this before in App 1. And of course, the reason is that we can then call the print method of the course in the print method of the student, which actually isn't included here, so you'll have to add that. It's of course not too difficult to do, but we're going to do a very similar thing with the course. So we're going to create a object of the module in the course so that we can then enroll those modules, or in this more technically add those modules to the course. Okay, so let's go to our course class now, and we want to create, I'm just going to work with 1 for now. Let's say, I mean, if we knew the module and we knew that there was only going to be 1 course, and we might then want to give a very specific name for our module, but just so that we could, in theory, reuse this course class for all of the modules, we might want to give it more of a generic name rather than a specific name, so that if we could have a computing course which has 1 set of 4 modules, and then we could, in theory, reuse this course class to have another set of different modules for a different course, like games development or cybersecurity or AI or data science. We're just coding this so that it can be reused later. So I'm just going to call these module 1, module 2, module 3, and module 4. And yeah, let's work with 1 for now. I'll ask you guys to add in the rest. Hopefully, if you've seen it done for 1 module, you'll easily be able to do it for the other 3. But just to save time here, I'm going to work with 1 module. And we want to, well, we could either create the modules hard-coded, a little bit like we did in App 2, or should we have created a module separately, if, say, we're the administrator of this application and we have the power to create modules and modify them and assign them, we could actually create them separately and then add them in. All right, so I think for the sake of time, I think what I'm going to do is demonstrate how we can do it by passing them in, but that's not to say that you could create a method which will actually fill in all the values for you. Like what you did in App 2, you could then create in your constructor where you just assign all the values for the tickets, and then that's created when you create the object of the ticket machine. Working with what we've got so far, I've already created an object on the object bench of CF452. So now I want to actually pass that data to this object. Right, so let's do that. Let's create a method which can add module. Okay. Oops. Let's put that on a new line. And of course, just like we used to do with the course, we have to then pass that in. And then we can assign that to module 1 in this case. And again, thinking ahead, I might also want to have a way of working out which module I'm going to assign it to, so I know whether it's going to go into module 1 or module 2 or module 3. Let's think how we can do that. I might want to create a integer here, just so I know, let's say module number. And so when I actually call this method, I'm going to have to state which one of the 4 modules this chosen one I'm adding is going to go into, which slot, if you like. So if I can say, well, if module number is 1, then assign that to module 1. And then likewise, if it's module 2, then we can, type in number 2, and then that module is going to go into module 2. And in fact, I'm thinking later, I'm probably going to need more than one module to actually perform the average. So let's, going back on what I said earlier, I'm going to create a module 2 to also demonstrate that average later and to demonstrate what I mean here. So we can say module number equals 2. And should I have specified that needs to go into the second module space? That's how I can work out where it's going to go. Right, I might want to say that's else if, just for exclusivity here. Okay, so if you follow that format for the remaining 2 modules, that should be a way of adding them if you've created them, like we were saying earlier, a bit like the first app. But if you want to go down the route of the second app, where you could actually create a standalone method, like I was saying earlier, where that will automatically fill in all the details and create the objects for you. And you just call that method and then it assigns the details. That's also possible because we're not, I guess we've kind of left it open here. We're not specifically saying it should follow the order of the ticket machine, where it's clearly a customer who is using this ticket machine rather than an administrator. But here, because of the language, we can kind of assume it's going to be an administrator, because a student won't be able to award themselves their marks, or maybe it might even be a tutor who's using this. Okay, so let's just finish up this comment here for this particular method. This is just going to add a module for the course. Okay. Right, so let's test this works. That's a good thing to do here. I'm probably going to have to recompile this just to test it works. So I'm going to want to create a new module. Let's work with what we had before. CF452. Fill in all this data again. Oh no, sorry, I've done that the wrong way around, haven't I? Let's put that there. And right, programming concepts. Here, let's award the mark. Check how we're doing. And let's then print this out to screen. There we go. There's, for this particular module, we've got the data there. Now, let's see if we can add this module to the course. So I need to create a course object. Let's say this chosen course is computing. And I think it was G400. We can look that up later. That's inconsequential at this stage. But we just want to assign that data there. Now, what I really want to do is check that I can add this module. So let's click on my CO452 module and specify we want it to go into the first slot. Let's see whether it did that. I don't think I've done the print. I don't think I've modified the print method yet to be able to respond to that. So the second module space is null, but I have got a pointer here to the first module. So that's encouraging. That tells me that I have now assigned that module to the first module space in this course. That's good. I suppose technically I could also create another module. Let's say this is CO456 for web. And it's just the module code. Let's see if we can do all the things we did before. Let's say we score 65 on this, and just check that's worked. Yeah, so that's good. That's encouraging. And let's now check that we can add this into the second space of the course, because remember we've got the CO452 in the first module of the course. Let's now check that we can add CO456 to the second space. And let's inspect this here. Okay, yeah, it's good. So we've got a pointer here. Let's check. Yes, that's good. Okay, so I've got two modules in the course. And perhaps in the course print, I might want to call the module print method so I can print out the details for the course from the course class rather than individually clicking on the print methods for each of the modules. So that might be something, I think we're instructed to do that later. Yeah, that's requirement 9. But there was one thing I wanted to really pick out here, which was the module completion. And this is a subtle point which might be missed if we skip on too much to the requirements. I'm pretty confident that you'd be able to finish up the remainder of the requirements. Really, it's just duplicating the format that I've demonstrated with creating 2 extra modules for the last 2. We've got 2 already, as you see here, 452 and 456. Then just need to follow through and add in some fields to represent the 2 other modules, and then follow a similar process for creating them and adding them. So I'm pretty confident you'd be able to do that. One thing I do want to draw out though, as I just said, which was the module completion. Okay, so this sentence here: to complete a module, the students must be awarded a mark of 40% or more. And then later, in order to calculate the final grade, we must have completed those modules, right? So this is the conditionality here, isn't it? We can only actually calculate this final grade providing that they've completed the module. And in order to complete the module, must have achieved 40% or more. So how do we do that? Well, we could, in our module class, have a field. We can add an extra field to store the value of whether this module has been completed or not. And remember, there's a specific data type that we can use to indicate whether something's true or false. Hopefully you remember that's the boolean data type. And this is just a very simple choice here. You know, either it's completed or it's not completed. And we can then represent that by a boolean. Okay, so let's add a field variable here. I'm going to say private boolean. And sometimes you see them named as isComplete, or isCompleted, or you could just say complete. I'm going to go with isCompleted, so I can then determine whether it's been completed or not. And in my constructor now, I'm going to want to start it off with not being complete because the mark is 0. So I'm going to say isCompleted has the value of false. So initially it's set to false. And then when I award the mark, depending on whether that mark is over 40% or not, I then might be able to change that to true. Okay, so providing they get over 40, I then want to update it. So how could I do this? Well, I could create a separate method. Yeah, let's do that. Let's create a separate method here to check the completion status, because it's actually going to be a separate condition to this one. The awardMark is checking to see whether it's valid, but the checkCompletion is going to be technically different. So that's because it's a different boundary, isn't it? It needs to be over 40. So let's create a separate method for it. checkCompletion. And in here, I'm going to say, well, if the mark is greater than or equal to 40, it can be 40 to be complete. It's here, oh, let me just align this, that I want to then say is complete, or is completed, sorry, I think I called it, is going to be true. It's only in that case where I want it to be true. So anything other than that, it's going to be false. And let's just have a comment here for this. Checks to see is complete. Okay, so providing it's a mark that's greater than 40, we then set it to be true. All right, and I might also want to check this completion status later, so it might be worth me having another method which returns the value for that. So this might be getCompletionStatus, and that just returns. So this is going to be a boolean return type. It's basically just going to return is completed. I'm just thinking ahead here. Return is completed. The value of it, whether it's true or false, because I might want to call that within the course class to check that this module is complete before I then calculate the average, which we didn't get to. That's in the final few stages of the requirements, before we then calculate the average. Okay, so I want to test that before I actually calculate this average. So in fact, I might want to, when I assign the mark, that might be a good place to then call checkCompletion, so that I update it should it be over 40. And later I can check that by returning it. And I may also possibly want to print it out to the screen as well. I may also be able to give my user of the system some indication of whether it's been completed or not. Module completion is completed. Okay, so we can then tell based upon whether it's true or false. Right. So let's check this now, and I have to recompile. So let's just quickly fill this in. Let's award the mark. So if I'm going to put in a mark in that's higher than 40, I expect the completion status to have changed from false to true. So let's just see what we get here. And we do see true. Okay, so that's good. Let's create another module. Let's do 456 again. Web, and then let's do 456. And now let's pass in a value that's less than 40. awardMark, let's say we get 39 there. Now when I print this out, I expect to see it still as false. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I know now that my completion status is working. And let's also check the methods here. Yeah, so 456, which had the mark of 39, returns false. That's good. And 452 should return true. Yeah, that's good because it was over. I think it was 65, wasn't it? So that's good. Okay, so that's the completion status. And then what I want to do is when I come to actually calculate the average, the final mark of the course, I'm going to only allow this calculation to take place if the module completion status is true for all of the modules. So therefore, I need to find a way to test that in here. And it might be useful for me to create a method which will check to see whether all of the modules are complete or not. So what could I say? I could say check completion within the course, which then looks at all of the completion statuses of the modules to then work out whether the course is complete or not. So let's create another Boolean variable within the course, also call it isCompleted, and let's start it off to be false as well. isCompleted in the constructor. And in my check completion of the course, I then want to look at all of the modules. So module 1 dot get completion status. If that is true, and in this case, because I've only got 2 modules, I'll check the second module. So it's going to be a long line here. So let's put this on the line below. If module.2 is also complete, let's put this within the if statement as well. If those 2 are complete, only then can I update the course completion to be true. Oh, I've missed something. Sorry, it's the parameters. Of course, these are methods. You need to put the parentheses there. Course completion, yeah. So isCompleted is then true for the course, and then anything else is still going to be false. And of course, you'll have to update this for your other 2 modules as well, module 3 and module 4. And then else, it still remains to be false. isCompleted is false. I might also want to output a little message to my user of the system. Maybe just remind them, please complete all the modules first. Please complete all modules. Okay, yeah. All right. Oh, and a comment as well. Yep. So let's just do that here. Check completion status for the course. Right. And then I can use the isCompleted of the course before I then calculate the average, the final mark, to then go on to create the final grade. Okay, so pretty confident you'll be able to do that. I'm going to leave that for you to do because we've shown you quite a bit to get started here. So have a go at creating this complete, and also make sure it check the course completion works as well. I'm confident that it will. But use that then as a case to create the other remaining methods to calculate the final mark. So that just looks at you might have to create a getMark method in the module, which returns the mark. Okay, just as we've got all these other getters, you might need to create a getMark method in the module so that if the course is complete, you can then add up the marks for each of the module and then calculate the average of that, which is your final mark, and then create another method for converting that numerical mark to a grade. Okay, and you're actually given the enumerate type for grades. So that has the letters for the letter grades from F to A, X assuming is no mark assigned, okay, and not complete. So you could also use that, but if you're not comfortable with enumerate types, just revert back to the string. Okay, but that should give you pretty much all you need to complete the remaining requirements. Okay, so have a go at that and see how you get on.